Welcome, my dear viewers, for yet another podcast with Kamal Prakash Seth. He's a great friend of mine, and I met him at the Awesomeness Fest Bali in 2014. It was connected by Mind Valley. Ever since, we have been very close. He is the country head at RSPO, Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil in India. RSPO is a voluntary sustainability standard for palm oil production and trade with over 4,500 members, such as companies, NGOs, and farmer groups in over 90 countries. So today we are going to talk about businesses with purpose, future-proofing your business in the post-COVID-19 world. Welcome, Kamal.
Hi RK, hi everyone. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Kamal. So let's get started. A lot of people are very worried, especially entrepreneurs are worried about how the COVID or how this situation, this outbreak is going to impact their business. And that is when we had the conversation about how you can help bring in the element of sustainability to their businesses so that they can survive and thrive during the good times. So can you share some thoughts with us about it?
Yes, so I think at the outset, I would like to acknowledge the fact that we are in some very difficult times. There is no question about it. People cannot take it lightly. Organizations, businesses cannot take it lightly because this is unprecedented. While it is that way, I feel that this is also an opportunity to reflect and evolve as a human being and as an organization. And if you are an entrepreneur, then all the more reasons for you, since you call the shots for your organization, if you're a founder or a co-founder especially. So I think that's the first thing to realize, that yes, there is a crisis. Yes, it needs to be taken seriously, but also to say that this is not all doom and gloom. Every crisis presents with an opportunity. And as entrepreneurs, we know that this crisis is also an opportunity for us to reflect and transform our own businesses. So what I'm going to talk about are three things essentially. First, I'll be talking about why there is a need for future proofing, especially in the post-COVID world. And then we'll talk about how can you make sure that it happens, your business models are sustainable. And we'll also talk about the qualities required for you to succeed as a sustainable entrepreneur whose business can thrive for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So those are the things that I can cover. So at the beginning, just to set the context, for those of you who know, the World Economic Forum happened at Davos at the beginning of this year, and business leaders from around the world gathered, and so much time they spent in just talking about future proofing. And why do you think that's the case? It is because businesses now realize that if you don't look at the next 10, 20, 30 years, keeping climate change in mind, your businesses will not thrive. It's as simple as that. Economies will not thrive. The governments will come under immense pressure, either because of a pandemic like this or because of the climate crisis, which is already going on. So as entrepreneurs, one must realize that if the world leaders, the business leaders are talking about it, what can we learn from that as someone running his or her own business? And now if you connect that to the COVID-19 situation, this is not new for at least the scientific world or the people working in the sustainability domain. We have known this for the last couple of decades, that if there is an immense loss of forest cover, biodiversity, if you're going to trade and consume wild animals, research is still out there to say that the climate crisis is not really totally different from any pandemic. They are obviously connected. And you will see in the next coming months, more and more research will come out of it. Organizations like WWF are already talking about this, since they do a lot of conservation work. So not to point fingers at anyone or any country, but simply to realize that as a species, we are interconnected. We interact with our environment, we interact with the animals, with the birds, with nature itself. And Mother Nature is calling us for action. Mother Nature is saying that this is an opportunity for you to reflect and think how you're progressing with your so-called economic growth, right? So if the world grows at 5 to 10% on GDP, what is it going to cost the world? So I will pause there, and just give you some space to reflect on that question, that Mother Nature is calling us through this crisis to say, are you sure this is the way you want to progress in the 21st century?
This is very profound. And like you said, Kamal, this is the time to actually reflect upon this question and really talk about how we can evolve our mindset, to be interconnected, to be connected to with Mother Nature. And this is like a reset button, isn't it? It's like a refresh
It is.
button
Yes.
that nature has imposed upon us.
Well, unfortunately, it's going to cost us lives, in this case, human lives. But if we treat human lives as very different from loss of species and extinction of species, then I don't think we are doing justice as the most evolved species on this planet. I mean, just because we are going to lose maybe, I don't know, 300,000, 500,000 people around the world. And of course, it's very serious, like I said at the outset. But let's also take the extension of other species that seriously, because we are dependent on them. We might not look at it that way. But if, for example, I'll tell you about a sustainable business, right? So, for example, if I am a business and I source agri commodities, let's say that I am an entrepreneur in India and I'm specializing in organic food, and I have an e-marketplace or an online web platform. I have a mobile application. People like you and me can go and order fresh fruits and vegetables. And these days, I'm sure you are struggling, as all of us are struggling, to buy fresh fruits and vegetables without leaving your home in this lockdown period. So think of it as sustainable sourcing from Mother Nature, right? So if Mother Nature is providing you with fresh apples, grapes, cabbages, everything that we eat on a day-to-day basis, and if that is done at the cost of polluting the soil, polluting the water, using pesticides that should not be used. So there's just a small example to think that you might make some money as an entrepreneur in the short run because you'll keep your cost of production low and not care about the soil's health, not care about the health of the water which is there, supporting the agriculture. And then you will keep selling. Maybe you'll show a turnover of 1 million USD, 2 million USD. Uh, but at what cost, right? Like at some stage you will reach a point in which the farmers who are supplying to you, the supply base that you have, the soil health has gone down so badly that you will not be able to source from that ground. So isn't it common sense to think as a sustainable entrepreneur to say that if I am sourcing from Mother Nature and she's not asking you for a huge price, like we already know the situation of farmers in India in this case, right? Like it's not the farmers who get the premium from organic products or sustainable products. It's everyone except for the farmer. Things are obviously better in the last 6 years with this current government, and some projects have happened. But still, there is a long way to go in India for sustainable farming to actually benefit the farmers who should be incentivized to do it.
Absolutely. Very, very well said, Kamal. So let's talk about the global entrepreneurs, wherein this is an outbreak that has affected every single entrepreneur in the entire world, isn't it? So
Yes.
this is also a time that I started, wondering what could be some really good business model that we could adopt post COVID. So my question to you is, how can we come up with a recession-proof business model?
Well, if I knew the answer to that question, I would have published a paper on it, but I will try to answer that. And it's a very relevant question in today's time. And I can share my examples. I mean, it's since 2012, 13, when I was previously doing finance recruitment, I have been running multiple organizations in the last 8 years. The latest is Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil for the last 2, 3 years. But let me share with you my journey as an entrepreneur for the last 8 years and more recently with RSPO. When I started with the Human Circle in 2014, and great friends like you and others who supported me in doing that right from the beginning, we realized that we cannot look at businesses for 5 years with an objective to sell it off and make money. I'm not saying that that is wrong or right, but I did not choose to go that way. For me, it was more important to build something that lasts beyond me. That is something which will run when I'm not there in this world, which means I was already thinking at the beginning 10, 20, 30 years and not 1, 2, 3 years. I think that is the first foundation to lay as to create a sustainable business model. To not think of it as just a profit making enterprise, because if profit making was the objective, you can do a lot of things, right? Like you can run a lot of for profit businesses for which you don't have to be an entrepreneur. You could be running your family business, for example. If you don't have that, you can join another business and get paid a high salary. the reason people choose to be entrepreneurs is because they want to create something which is larger than themselves, right? Like this organization, this cause which drives us. So I think
Nice.
that is the first point I want to make, that the foundation has to be long term and very strong. And the why has to be very clear as to why you're starting it, and connecting it to sustainability again. So if your goal was in 5 years, let's maximize the profit and not care for the environment from where I'm sourcing my products, or the workers who are not paid properly, or if there are any human right violation along the supply chain, right? So while that might benefit you in 5 years, your consciousness will ask you the same question when you'll move on to your next big thing, of at what cost are you moving to your next startup or your next job, because you're guilty of it, right? I mean, and in the Indian culture, I know how powerful the concept of karma is, and we know it works in the same lifetime. So if you're going to damage human beings life or nature itself, you are going to pay back at some stage. So I don't want to make it philosophical, but I just want to make it a point that what goes around comes around. So sustainable business model means to keep in mind your source, your supply base. So that supplier who is supplying to you, how is the health of his or her business? So just to take another example, right? Another story of a business sourcing, Indian business sourcing something from China, or American business sourcing something from China. Now, can you imagine? There is research which I have been reading, and more and more will get published again. Now, think of it this way: the entire American economy, a huge chunk of it is based on Chinese manufacturing that happens in China, because all the factories are moved from the western part of the world to India, China, Philippines, so on and so forth. So
Correct.
think of it at the global level now. Now, if you and I in India and US, for example, are not going to keep in mind what's happening with the organizations in China, we are setting ourselves up for disaster. And economists are telling us that it's time for the world to look at the qualitative aspect of economic growth, not just the quantitative aspect of it. Like think of countries like Bhutan, for example, right? It's a classic case. Bhutan has had a gross domestic happiness index for decades now. And the Scandinavian world came around it. So now they have some other parameters to judge the economic growth on qualitative aspects. But
Which
why
is
not
the
India?
happiness of citizens, right?
Yes, exactly. And not just of the citizen, happiness of the planet, like of that country, of nature, of the health of the forest, for example, right?
Okay.
Health of the animals, for that matter.
Wow.
So, to wrap up that thought, what I was saying was that we live in a global supply chain. Taking palm's example as well, like palm oil is grown in Malaysia and Indonesia. 90% of it comes from it. India is the largest importer of palm oil in the world because it's the most efficient and affordable commodity. And what we say is that the only alternate to palm oil is sustainable palm oil. Because if the world moves to sunflower, soy, or others, it takes 4 to 10 times of land, water, and other resources. So if I look at it, my own work, right? Like if I think of it as India as a country and I'm buying from Malaysia, Indonesia, I know that there are forest fires that are happening in Indonesia, Australia, Siberia, Amazon, in Brazil, you name it, right? The last 12 months, we have seen the worst forest fires. So if you're an entrepreneur sourcing something from China, Malaysia, Indonesia, isn't this common sense? And forget about philosophy. Isn't this common sense for me to think that I should protect my supplies in Indonesia? Because if we don't protect them or incentivize them to give me sustainable palm oil, they then have no choice probably to then go burn down a forest or to do something totally unsustainable, in which case my business will no longer survive 5 years from now because my supply base is affected, right? So
Right.
same for China, same for Indonesia. So sustainable business model needs to be built keeping in mind the entire supply chain, which
Okay.
means all the way to the source, all the way to China, all the way to Wuhan, Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, Jakarta, wherever you buy from, wherever you source from. And even if your business is limited to India or limited to the US or limited to a European country, you must think of the source in your own country as well. Maybe you're sourcing from a village, maybe you're sourcing from a small entrepreneur out there. So think of the health of the business of your suppliers as well, or your clients as well, and not just your own.
This is perfect. So, in essence, you are saying that the entrepreneurship is all about creating an ecosystem, a healthy ecosystem, right? Which,
Yes.
so a lot of business owners, they think about the business only in terms of profits that they can make by, selling a resource at a lower, I mean, buying from at a lower cost and selling at a higher price. But when you really
Right.
look into it, when you look at the suppliers, the real, the grassroots levels, wherein the real work is happening, right? It could be talent, it could be, raw materials, whatever it is. You're actually, in essence, creating an ecosystem, right?
Absolutely. Healthy
Families,
ecosystem. Yeah.
healthy ecosystem, and families dependent on it.
Yeah, and so many employment being generated, right? As entrepreneurs, you have the opportunity to create so many direct as well as indirect employment opportunities. And that's a great work that entrepreneurs do around the world. And we must recognize and appreciate the entrepreneurs to do it. But now let's take this conversation in the post-COVID-19 world. Now,
Okay.
what do you think is going to happen? Now, let's say the world comes back to some normal behavior in 2 months, 3 months, or 6 months. At some stage, we will recover from this, right? That is what the most likelihood is. So in the post-COVID world, if you're looking at running your business and not caring about your talent, your employees, your suppliers, then you're doing a disservice not just to yourself and your business, but also as a responsible global citizen. Because what you're essentially saying is that, yeah, that pandemic happened, we are over it now, and let's go business as usual. That will be one of the biggest mistakes. If anyone thinks that there'll be business as usual after this, there will be no business as usual, because the whole world will shift to a new realization that the healthy ecosystem needs to be created. It's like you don't have a choice about it. And I think my sense is that even the governments are going to incentivize that behavior. My sense is that governments across the world are going to ask businesses and entrepreneurs to actually look at their policies. If it was for me to promote, I would make it mandatory for every business to have a sustainable sourcing policy. Because without a sustainable sourcing policy, you cannot hold businesses accountable for it. Because I could be a business in India, China, US, Europe, anywhere. And if I don't even have a sustainable sourcing policy, what is my parameter to judge whether I'm sourcing responsibly or I'm sourcing irresponsibly?
Kamal, if we as a species do not learn from this outbreak and this incident, then there must be no bigger fools than us, isn't it?
Well, we will pay a price for it. We'll pay a huge price for it.
Yeah, of
Some
course.
people will pay that price within their own families. Some people will pay in their neighborhood, in their city, in their country. But there is going to be a huge chain reaction if we don't learn from this, because there is nothing to say that SARS happened in 2004 or 3. There was a tsunami around the same time, if you remember. It's within 15 years, and in between there was an Ebola, right? So it's not coming from nowhere. It's showing you a trend that
Yes.
every 5 years, every 5 to 10 years, something is structurally wrong with the global economy right now, because of which these epidemics are coming up. It's not
Right.
coming from a vacuum. It's coming from human behavior and business behavior, which is not sustainable.
Kamal, this reminds me of the conversations that we used to have a few years ago. If you don't learn the lesson that life has taught you, then the life is not going to stop until you learn
Yes,
that lesson,
absolutely.
isn't
It's
it?
our ancient wisdom across cultures. Life will keep
Correct.
giving you the same lesson till it is convinced that you have got the lesson. So
Correct.
if you did not learn from a COVID-19, be prepared for another one coming in the next 5 to 10 years, or even faster than that.
Hmm. So, what are the qualities required for a successful, sustainable entrepreneur?
Very good question. And again, I can relate it to the behavior I have seen within my friends who are doing it quite well, and things that I have tried. So I think one of the biggest qualities for a successful, sustainable entrepreneur is resilience. And I say resilience, especially in the current situation, because if you are not resilient as a founder or a co-founder, or even as a young working professional, if you're in the founding team of a startup, for example, you are a part of a team which is taking up a mandate which is very challenging already, right? Because you have left your job or you finished your studies and straight away decided to take up entrepreneurship. In both the cases, your resilience has to be very high, your persistence has to be very high. Because if you're not resilient and you're not persistent, you're in the wrong job. I'm sorry to say that. Because if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you must be resilient. You must be prepared to see the highs and lows. Some people experience that in the share market, and they have those guts to do it. The rest people do that through the entrepreneurship world, right?
Right.
So if you don't have the capacity to go through this,
Yeah.
month after month, quarter after quarter, year after year. Your employees might leave you, employees might love you. You still have to make the tough decisions because you're the boss, right?
Right.
So I think the first quality is resilience. The second one I would say is resourcefulness, more than ever before. And as an Indian, I can say that we have learned this over from our ancestors from thousands of years, that resourcefulness and respect of nature is the key to success. We have known this. I think it's just the last few centuries, this whole,
Mhm.
the global economy, which has done its own wonders. The price I feel we have paid is that we have become a bit careless with our consumption. I think lifestyles across the world are not sustainable. We already see obesities, health issues across, right? That comes from the fact that we are in an abundance stage. A lot of us, in at least in middle class, upper middle class families, we have more than what we need in many cases. And I think that we need to again use this time to reflect and see how, as an entrepreneur, you can be more resourceful. So let's say that you were traveling to 10 conferences in 12 months, and I was doing the same. So I was taking flights every couple of weeks to go for a conference, to go for a meeting. I was in different countries, and now I'm able to do more and more of that work virtually. So if you're resourceful, not only are you contributing to the planet by reducing your flights and greenhouse gas emissions, but you also cut your cost, right? Like, how much does it cost to do a meeting online? Like, this conversation yesterday, I was having another one. Every day I have at least one or two video calls, for which I would have otherwise traveled to another country or another city. So I think resourcefulness is the second quality, which also brings you business benefits as obvious, right? The third one is, I mean, I have a debate between two of them, but I would still stick to uh, this constant learning. Uh, the learning in this period, when you have more time and you're more free, let's say, because you're not stuck in traffic, you're not waiting at the airport for 2-3 hours. Please use that time to upgrade yourself and become more familiar with how the global ecosystem is operating and working. So these are the three top qualities that I feel that people need to keep in mind. So being resourceful is really, really important. Maximizing all your resources, making sure that you're constantly learning and upgrading, whether you read a book, you hear a podcast, you see a video, anything else that you do. So if these qualities are kept in mind, I think you will create a sustainable business model.
Excellent, excellent. How to adopt a sustainable lifestyle for an entrepreneur?
Walk the talk, especially if you are promoting organic food and in your own kitchen you don't have organic food, right? Like, I mean, it's like, it doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, it might sound a bit philosophical, but the truth is that if you're preaching something to the world, like a behavior, let's say that you're telling the world, don't use single-use plastic. Like, I was doing that, so I can relate to my own lifestyle, right? So when we started telling people to not use single-use plastic last year, we looked at our own home and we saw every single room has single-use or some kind of plastic in it, if not single-use. So how can we minimize that? So practice what you preach as an entrepreneur, because you have all the more responsibilities to do that. Either your product or your service is saying something and you are not saying it. So whether it's organic food, whether it's single-use plastic, whether it's saying, yes, you should pay well to your workers and laborers. Ask yourself, how much are you paying to the maid who comes to your house, the person who cleans your car, the person who cleans your, irons your clothes. We live in these times in which we are fortunate to have other people to do such work for you. In many parts of the world, people don't have that luxury, right? So you have to clean your own car, you have to iron your own clothes, you have to clean your own toilets and your own house. I think in some cultures, especially in the Asian culture, we have that luxury, that we have a group of people who are willing to do it. So practice what you preach. So if your business products or services are basically promoting an idea or a cause, please make sure that you look at your own house, your own lifestyle, to say, how many flights am I taking when I'm criticizing someone else for causing greenhouse gas emission? I'm blaming an industry for causing fossil fuel, related pollution, for example, right? Look at your own car. What kind of car do you use? How many times do you use a shared carpooling, for example? So I think these are few examples, but it's mostly to self-reflect and walk the talk. So get yourself aligned. in terms of what you are saying, what you are thinking, and how you're being deep within.
Absolutely. It's be the change, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, without being the change in the post-COVID world, fingers will be raised. Make no mistakes. Fingers will be raised, whether from one country to another, from one business industry to another. That will happen. So we are looking at a world now moving forward that people are going to start holding others accountable as to who caused it, why was it so bad, why was this lockdown not done before. But the fact is, no one really has the right or wrong answers. Like, there is no formula to say you start the lockdown today and you finish the lockdown tomorrow. There is no formula to say that you close the airports today and you open the airports tomorrow. So there will be chaos. So be prepared for chaos. But the ones who succeed in chaos are the people who are resilient, because we are used to this curve which goes up and down, because we can then take a step back and see the curve, see that the next 6 months are going to be full of chaos. Therefore, my house needs to be in order. Because if my business is not in order, then I make myself more vulnerable for others to point fingers at me or my business. So, I mean, that's what I would say. And as Human Circle, as RSPO, that's what we are trying to do in our organizations. And it's an opportunity for all entrepreneurs out there to make sure to use this time to put your business in order. If you don't have a policy, please make sure you write a policy for sustainable sourcing. You write a policy for healthy employees management, if you don't have a HR policy, please make sure you write a HR policy so that you take care of the health of your employees. Like, maybe you're not giving health insurance benefits to your employees. So think of it those ways, right? Because at the end of the day, if people start leaving your organization, who's going to pay the maximum price? We know how difficult it is to hire high quality talent anywhere in the world, right? So if employees feel that they are not taken care of by the employers, by you, then you just make them and yourself more vulnerable. They will have no choice but to leave you, because they will think you don't take care of them in the difficult times. So in the post-COVID world, we are going to see a lot of chaos. So I think it'll be wise to make sure that your house is in order.
Absolutely. So the world is not going to be the same, in terms of mindset that we
This is
all
not.
share in a post-COVID world, isn't it? So
Yeah.
which brings me to one more additional question that I wanted to ask you. Which books do you highly recommend for entrepreneurs to read? So which entrepreneurial books has had the maximum impact on you in the recent time?
The one author that I have been focusing for the last 1 year is Yuval Noah Harari. And the latest book that I read was 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, something like that. I
Yes.
think we are fortunate to have someone like him who is not just an author. He's like a future, he prophesizes, he looks at the next 10, 20, 30, even 100, 200 years. So he's someone that I would definitely urge you, if you don't have the time to read his book, at least see his videos, see his interviews on YouTube. It's freely available. Uh, because he is making you think the whole century at least, right? And you and I are going to see a major part of this century, and he talks about it in a very scientific yet grounded way. He puts context to everything that he says.
Excellent. So I'm going to leave the links, the show notes, and the checklists from this conversation so that our viewers and listeners can benefit from taking real action based on, and I also trust that not everybody who started listening to this podcast or watching this interview has completed it. So for their benefit also, I'm going to leave a worksheet, a one-page worksheet that outlines every actionable step that we have covered in this podcast and this interview. So
Right.
with that said, do you want to, uh, you know, tell our listeners how we can find you and any finishing thoughts?
The easiest way would be to Google my name. I'm very active on social media, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook as well. So I'll be happy to connect with you there. I have, of course, LinkedIn as well. So you can send me a LinkedIn request. You can just search with my full name and you will easily find me on all the social media channels.
Yes, and the full name is Kamal Prakash Seth. And there
Yes,
will be a link to his LinkedIn and the social media accounts as a show note on this episode. Great. So,
right.
any thoughts before we wind up this podcast?
No, I think I just want to thank you for creating this opportunity for us to have this conversation. I think it was well timed. I was looking to create more such content since I have more time, no physical meetings, no flights. So it's great that we did it. And my ask for the viewers or the listeners is basically please use this time to reflect for yourself, for your family, for your business. It's an opportunity. Look at this crisis as an opportunity, and don't pay attention to news so much because it can really paralyze you. And a lot of it is fake news. So be very, very careful with the source of your information consumption. And I already see a lot of people suffering from mental health issues. Either they're not used to working from home or they're not used to so much chaos and disruption. So please pay attention to your mental health as well. And one of the easiest way to do it is to just use a strong filter on where you receive your news from. Are you receiving it on WhatsApp, or are you going to the WHO's website to find out the right information about things? So yeah, reflect, learn, upgrade yourself, be the change you want to see in the world, because in the post-COVID world, it is going to be a reset. So be ready for a reset, but put your house in order before it gets worse.
Great. That's amazing insights that you shared with us on this episode. Thank you so much, Kamal. And this episode was definitely coming for a very long time, And I'm glad that this has been very timely. And the messages that you shared with us is going to impact the entrepreneurs in so many different levels, not just in the business level, but even in their lifestyle and the way that they think, the way they perceive things, the way they treat the people around them, and the way they treat their business as an ecosystem, not just a profit building machine. So it's high
Yes.
time that we start adopting these mindset, and it's very timely that you've come up with such great insights. Thank you so much, Kamal.
Thank you, RK, and it was a pleasure. And I hope that we can do this more often if it adds value to the audience.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, and bye. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.